What up? This is Patrick Hayes. Welcome to my YouTube channel. And in this video, I want to talk about multidimensionality. And I want to talk about how to become more multidimensional. And a lot of understanding how to become more multidimensional is really understanding what multidimensionality really is. And in understanding it better, then we can understand how to push our consciousness to the fringes of the dimensions that we exist within now and start seeing in between the lines to other dimensions and then stabilizing our consciousness in other dimensions, which ultimately is what becoming a multidimensional person is, right? So in this video, what I want to do is, because the term multidimensionality or being multidimensional is thrown around so much, so I want to bring a lot of clarity to what that actually means so we can really understand it in a grounded way. And then we can start living our lives in a way or taking action in certain ways that help us to expand our consciousness and stabilize in other dimensions. So if you stick around to the end of this video, it is going to come home in a whole new way. This video is really fucking cool. So trust me, stick around to the end of it because you're really going to be super stoked that you did. Okay, so what does it mean to become a multidimensional person, a multidimensional consciousness? And the simplified way that I'm going to describe that is that to become multidimensional is to stabilize your consciousness in different dimensions of perception. So a great example of that I think everybody will understand is the idea of going lucid in the dream state. So we have our waking state and then we have our dreaming state. These are two different dimensions, right? The physical world that we walk around in, that's one dimension. And then the dream world, the astral realm, that's another dimension. So becoming multidimensional is stabilizing your consciousness in two different realms. So when we become lucid, essentially what we're doing is we're carrying our consciousness. There's a stabilization of a certain level of awakeness or consistency within our consciousness that we're stabilizing in the dream realm that we also have stabilized in the physical realm. So when we're dreaming, we realize that we're dreaming, we know we're dreaming, and we can even remember our waking state. While at the same time, while we're in our waking state, we can remember our dream state. So it goes both directions. And this is becoming multidimensional. So the more lucid you become, you are becoming more multidimensional in a particular realm, right? So you're becoming multidimensional and you're stabilizing in the astral realm. But you can stabilize in many different other realms too. And that's part of what I want to get into. So the first example was waking and dreaming. But when we start thinking about consciousness states, there's many different consciousness states in many different dimensions. So we have waking, we have dreaming, and then we have a multitude of different trance states. They can be somewhat associated with the different brainwave states. And then they can also be somewhat associated with different experiential phenomenon that we experience that it usually is more than one brainwave state that are happening at once. So, for example, we have the liminal space in between waking and sleeping, right? And this is theta, typically. But this is a space where we're not fully asleep, but we're not fully awake. And stabilizing your consciousness in that realm is extremely powerful, because if you can stabilize a consciousness in your theta state, in your in-between awake and in-between sleep state, then you can really reprogram your subconscious mind in a very powerful way. But then there are many other trance states beyond this, right? So there's different kinds of like flow states that you can get into. There's daydreaming states. And the list goes on. There's tons of different forms of consciousness that are, in a sense, their own different dimension. It's their own perception of reality, a different realm of reality. And by stabilizing our consciousness across these different spaces, we are becoming more multidimensional. We're getting access to a different form of our consciousness and a different realm of all of existence than we've had access to before in a conscious way. And this is what becoming multidimensional is. But it goes a lot deeper than this. And it goes far beyond this, because it's not just these states that I've talked about, like waking, dreaming, and trance states. It's also like the emotional realm, right? So you can think of your emotions as like a sense perception of sorts. When you are feeling with your emotions, you can feel all sorts of different things that you don't have access to any other way. So the emotional realm, we can think of the emotional realm as its own particular dimension. And by becoming emotionally intelligent, what we're doing is we're stabilizing our consciousness in the emotional realm. Now, this also works for the thought realm, and this also works for even, say, the instinctual realm. And we could even break it down in even more different pieces if you like. But we can say instinctual, emotional, and mental. These are three different realms where when we stabilize our consciousness in these realms, then we become more aware in that space, and the access to different dimensions of that dimension or different areas of that particular realm start to open up. And this is becoming more multidimensional. Okay, so I'm gonna take it even deeper. So a really simple way of understanding it is, think about vision, right? So we can see in the physical realm, we can see different things. I can focus on my hand right here. I'm looking at my hand in the physical realm, right? How do we see into a deeper dimension of the visual spectrum? Well, we can see into the deeper dimension by looking through a microscope or looking through a telescope, right? We're seeing into a different realm then. So there's this entire world going on. You can say the quantum world, or even, above the quantum world, just the microscopic world. There's an entire world going on right there that exists very close to us, but until we had access to a microscope, we maybe couldn't ever actually see it or know that it even exists. Same thing with the telescope, right? So these are actually different dimensions. They're different dimensional realms that our consciousness can become aware of and then learn to stabilize in, start to understand the realm and learn how to navigate in the realm once we gain access to it. So a really interesting story that I experienced was, one time I was sitting on the toilet and I was hunched over. It was early in the morning, and I looked down at my arm and I realized that I could see the hair on my arm like through a microscope. I was seeing the ridges on the hair. It was like absolutely up close. And I was like, what is going on? I have supervision right now. This is crazy. How can I see this? And what I noticed was that there was an accumulation of tears in my eyes, just wetness from my eyes, that had created like a well of water. It wasn't enough to turn into a tear and fall out of my eye, but it was enough to cover over my pupil. And the result was that it was acting like a super magnifying glass. And I was able to see, like I said, the ridges of my hair and the pores in my skin, like I was looking at it through like a microscope or a really intense magnifying glass. And I tripped out about this for a really long time after that. I was like, this is crazy. And I realized that if I decided to take the time to stabilize my capacity to generate tears and then hold it just before the point that it turned into a tear and fell out of my eye, that I could actually learn how to create magnifying glasses out of my eyes without a magnifying glass. And then I could, see into the micro world without needing some sort of external technology, right? And this brings me back to the explanation that the human body is a really advanced form of technology. And when we learn how to modulate this human body, we actually see into all sorts of different dimensions that exist, but we maybe didn't have access to before. So here's another way of breaking it down. The visible light spectrum. So the light spectrum's huge. We have gamma, we have infrared, we have ultraviolet, we have radar. There's all these different wavelengths. But what the human can see with their two eyes, say in just the average human can see with their two eyes, is a very small sliver of that, right? But we know these other dimensions exist. In the same way that I was able to modulate my consciousness and utilize this technology that we call our biology in order to see super close, like a magnifying glass, we can also modulate ourselves to see different things that we wouldn't normally see. Different masters in different mystical traditions can see like into the infrared spectrum, for example. But the really key thing here for understanding how it is that we're able to start expanding our consciousness to see into different realms, and it goes way beyond the light spectrum, right? This goes for every single different realm of consciousness, right? So we think within a certain spectrum, right? So how do we expand our consciousness past the fringes of what we've thought before into a whole new dimension, right? How do we feel into different dimensions, right? We're looking at a really small spectrum of emotion. We're looking at a really small spectrum of our cognitive ability, and there's tons of room for improvement. So how do we start seeing to these in-between dimensions? And part of understanding how to do that is understanding the idea that we're vibrational beings, and the resonance of our vibration is what stabilizes us in this, say, physical waking dimension, right? So, for instance, if you're looking at something, if I'm looking at this book here, and I'm focusing really strongly on this book, and I'm literally focusing on it with my eyes so that it is in focus, then I am stabilizing. That's an act of stabilizing my consciousness, especially my visual apparatus. It's stabilizing this consciousness into this dimension. So it's in resonance with this dimension, right? What you will find is that if you go into a trance state or you start daydreaming, What happens to your eyes when you daydream? Well, your eyes defocus when you're like staring off. They call it a cat stare. When you're cat staring, your eyes defocus. You're not actually focusing on anything in the physical realm because you are, in a sense, detuning yourself to a certain degree from the physical realm to focus in on another dimension. And so in a sense, this is an act of multidimensional perception, focusing onto another dimension. So take this perception and let's expand upon this. So if we're focused in the physical realm, that brings us here. So if we want to become more multidimensional, then what we need to do is start defocusing from whatever physical realm we're in and start focusing on different realms by changing our vibration to be more in harmony with another realm. So this happens when we're falling asleep. This happens when we go into trances. We shift into a different realm. Our vibration shifts, and then we start perceiving different things on a different spectrum of existence. So to drive this home just a little bit more, meditation. When we are walking around in the physical world, we are captivated by all the things going on. So when you meditate, what do people like to do? They like to go to a place where there's not any distractions, because the distractions will pull you back into this realm, right? And you get quiet. So you stop focusing on the energetics of the physical world. And then in getting quiet, your vibration shifts and you can start having access to different vibrational states that are, say, beyond your normal everyday waking state. It starts tuning you in to higher vibrational states that you can learn how to bridge and then experience at the same time. So then you can walk through the world and experience these high vibrational states, right? So that's a way of kind of tuning to an in-between channel and getting to another channel. So how do people see auras? Well, when you're looking at an aura around somebody, that may inform you about different emotional states or different states of health or vitality in their physical body. And when you're looking at an aura, how do you look at an aura? Well, the process for looking at an aura is to relax your eyes and look to the edge of whatever it is that you're looking at. And you kind of get into this slight trance, and then you can see the glow around whatever the physical object is that you're looking at. But essentially what you're doing is you're defocusing your focus from the physical realm as we know it, and you're starting to tune yourself into the etheric or the astral realm to be able to see that aura that is around whatever it is you're looking at. And this is an act of becoming more multidimensional. So when you become truly a more multidimensional being, you start to learn how to modulate your consciousness to shift into other realms at will, and then you stabilize your awareness and your consciousness in those other realms. So you have a consciousness that can carry over into a lot of different realms, meaning you could be walking around, you could be like, okay, I'm going to tune into the astral realm, or I'm going to tune into the etheric realm, I'm going to read an aura, I'm going to tune into a trance state to get into the flow, I'm going to tune into the infrared spectrum to see if there's some other thing going on there, and you keep your consciousness with you, meaning everybody shifts to different realms, but are they conscious while they're doing it? Everybody goes to sleep, but are they lucid when they're dreaming? Everybody goes to that liminal space in between awake and asleep, where they're in the theta brain state, but are they aware when they're in that space? Do they have their consciousness with them? Is that awareness there so that they can actually utilize their consciousness or explore in that realm while they're in that in-between space? How aware are we of the emotional worlds that we move through, the mental worlds that we move through, the instinctual worlds that we move through? How aware are we of that? Have we stabilized our consciousness in those realms? So you hear people talk about they have cross-connecting lives on different planets. You hear a lot of people talk about, well, I have parallel dimensions, I have my different counterparts, I have all these multi-dimensional incarnations or these experiences or these different dimensions that I can tune into, right? And that's taking it really, really far. But I'm bringing it back to the basics. It's like, well, listen, I mean, you can tune into the fringes of the physiological experience in the biological world by doing different practices, maybe like looking through your peripheral vision. A lot of different seers will all tell you that the way that they're able to see, if they're reading different people or they're reading interdimensionally, is they see through their peripheral vision. And it's because this is at the fringes of where your visual consciousness exists, right? It's not looking at it straight down the barrel, right? It's looking through the fringes, which start opening you up to help you read between the lines or see into other realms. So becoming multidimensional is being able to stabilize your consciousness and stabilize your intentions and your motives in these other realms so that you can say, okay, I want to travel to this space and I want to accomplish this. I want to learn what this realm looks like. What is the topography of this particular realm? How do I navigate through it, right? And you want to bring your consciousness there because a lot of these spaces your consciousness is going to anyway. You might not even remember it, but it's even less likely that if you do remember it, that you really are an avid navigator of these different realms. And then, of course, the ability to start traveling to different spaces where we can connect in with, say, different extraterrestrial counterparts or different alternate dimension versions of ourselves, or cross-connecting parallel lives, or all these different kind of things, past lives. All these things start opening up to us because we've learned how to start seeing between the lines and traveling to different realms. And a lot of it has to do with just this basic understanding that when we're totally focused in on one realm, we're stabilizing with that realm. So how do we start reading between the lines? How do we start defocusing? And this isn't an invitation to avoid reality as we experience it today. This is not an invitation whatsoever. In fact, being able to do this stuff helps you to navigate through the waking state more effectively, because we're always going into these different states. We're always having access to these different realms. The idea is to incorporate them, but not to use it as a kind of escape, to try to just avoid living in the world as it is, because we might find that painful. So I encourage you to explore these different kinds of experiments, see what works for you, see what doesn't, and be open to the fact that you are already a multidimensional being. It's just a matter of stabilizing your consciousness or bringing awareness to these other realms. And then once you stabilize awareness in those other realms, then you can really start searching or exploring in those other realms, because you've now brought an intention to that stabilized, that gives you the capacity to kind of be a captain of the ship and not just kind of get blown around in them. So thank you so much for tuning in. This is Patrick Hayes. Like, subscribe, share this video with your friends if you feel like it would be useful for them. And I will talk to you next time. One love.